everybody. Welcome to this edition of Out of Bounds. I'm John Luck with Mary Evers, and we're going to be talking about the Bruins and Celtics. If you couldn't tell by our backgrounds, I got the Bruins and the good team over here, the green team. Mary has Pastrnak behind her. We'll talk about him in just a little bit. But we do start off with the Boston Red Sox, actually, and their former outfielder, Mookie Betts, signing one of the biggest contract extensions in Major League Baseball history, 12 years, $365 million. Mary, you're a Red Sox fan, so what are your thoughts on this big extension for Mookie Betts?
It's sad because I think even though it was probably an unrealistic hope to think that Mookie might come back here in free agency, it was still a little bit there. But overall for Mookie, good for him. He definitely deserves the money. The contract was a little bit surprising. I would only say not because of he doesn't deserve it, but because with the pandemic and everyone losing money this season for the most part, I was slightly surprised to see the Dodgers willing to offer him that much money for that long going forward, especially also considering the fact that they have plenty of players that they're going to need to pay big if they want to keep them around. So good for Mookie. I'm sad to see that he's going to be in LA for probably the rest of his career, but you can't be upset for the guy. He definitely deserved it.
Yeah, this is all about the pandemic because before this season, Mookie Betts was expected to bring in probably close to, $500 million, maybe just shy of there. But if you wait until after the season, he'd get a long-term extension, but it wouldn't be for that money. So the $365 million, I think that's as much as the Dodgers can possibly give him, especially with the payroll that they're going to have to make because they have a very talented outfield.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to see the Red Sox match that. I'm very weary when we start to see contracts anywhere north of 7 years. So 12 years, that's just a big burden. I mean, look at some of the contracts still that the Red Sox are under. Manny Ramirez and those deferred payments. Rusney Castillo and those deferred payments.
Yeah.
Pablo Sandoval in those deferred payments. So
yeah,
the Red Sox need to kind of take a break, and that's what we're seeing with this year's team. Now, we'll talk about that another day and another time here, but it's all about the winter teams playing in the summer months.
Yep.
We're going to start off here with the Boston Bruins as Tuukka Rask was interviewed along with the other two candidates for the Vezina Trophy, which is the best goaltender in the NHL.
Yep.
And he had some interesting comments about, an injury he sustained, breaking a couple of fingers during the offseason, but also about playing every minute. So this is just some of a statement he made saying, "We've had the luxury of me sharing the net with Jaro Halak the last couple of years, and it's worked out great for us. As far as the playoffs are concerned, you never know. You lay off for 4 months, and then you get right back into playoff hockey. There might be some injuries and some nagging injuries that might happen on your groin or hips." Tuukka Rask's toughness, durability has been questioned over the past few years, and rightfully so, but I'm not exactly a diehard Bruins fan, and I'm kind of worried by what I'm reading from Tuukka Rask here. Right. We haven't even gotten to the ice in Toronto, and it sounds like he's already making excuses.
I don't know if it's necessarily an excuse or the fact that he's probably already resigned himself to sharing a lot of the ice time with Jaro Halak. Now, last year during the Stanley Cup playoffs, Tuukka played every single game, and for what it's worth, he had a phenomenal playoffs last year. Obviously, they ended up losing the cup, but for the most part, he had an incredible offseason, incredible postseason, probably the best we've ever seen from him. But like he said, because of the layoffs, I would not expect him to play every single game like he did last year, especially considering Halak has been extremely dominant this year himself, and both of them are in the top 5 in the league of save percentage this season. So if you have a second guy that's, I don't want to say just as good as your first guy, but very comparable, I don't think there's any reason for them not to play both goalies. So I'm not really concerned. I think Bruce Cassidy will end up, definitely for the round robin, we'll see Halak, but I wouldn't be too surprised if we see Halak in a couple of playoff games this year.
Here's my issue with Tuukka Rask. He makes close to, $7 million this year and next year. That's the second biggest cap hit on the Boston Bruins. Mm-hmm. Okay, and this year so far, the regular season, he started 41 games. Yaroslav Halak started, I believe, 31 games. And Halak makes almost a third of what Tuukka Rask makes.
Yeah.
If you're going into a big job interview and there's a multi-million-dollar paycheck out there for you, the last thing you want to do, and I mean, I'm not one to say this, but the last thing you want to do is go in there and make excuses. Because if you go into a job interview and they say, we're going to need you to work every Sunday, we're going to need you to work all the holidays,
Right.
can you do this? I mean, most people will say yes,
Right.
but this sounds like Tuukka Rask is making excuses to me. And
Yeah.
you look at the past, he's had so many excuses. You go back to that game 82 where he decided to eat a bunch of chicken wings
Oh my
instead of
God.
going out on the ice.
You bring that up all the time. Like, is
That's the
that the
Bruins.
only thing you have against him?
That's almost okay. How about this? Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final against the Blackhawks. 2 goals in a minute.
Okay, that's what. But you always bring up the chicken wing thing. Like, that's a relevant factor in his performance.
It's true. It's relevant, and it's kind of funny. So, okay. But still, Tuukka Rask is your top goalie, and you look at some of the best goalies that the NHL has ever had. You look at players like Marc-Andre Fleury, Patrick Waugh. If you put them out there, and obviously these different times, but they're going to go out there and play every minute of every game of the playoffs. I understand that last year was a playoff grind, but Tuukka Rask needs to be out there. And as far as the round robin games are concerned, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but there's not much room for error for the Boston Bruins. Very easily, this Boston Bruins team can drop from number 1 to number 4.
Yeah.
And their track record here against these teams that they're going to be playing with shows that Bruins fans shouldn't be feeling very comfortable. Another player that isn't feeling very comfortable, well, depending on how you look at it, is David Pastrnak, as Bruce Cassidy has ruled him unfit to play or unfit to practice during most of the practices. He was the last one to come back from the layoff during the pandemic, and he practiced for 1 day, and then him and Andre Kasha have been ruled out really ever since that 1 day. So is there real concern among Bruins fans?
Yes, because I think I don't know much about Kasha as a player. Obviously, we got him this season, and he's been decent for the Bruins. But I'm far more worried about Pastrnak than I am him. I think what's happening with Pastrnak just shows that he's still a young kid. I mean, he's 24 years old, so I guess you can't really call him a kid anymore. But he still kind of has that I'm going to do what I want because I have a bunch of money and I don't have to answer to anyone. That mentality that normally would be like, all right, whatever. But in a pandemic, it's worrying. So I think what the problem, from what I was hearing on 98.5 mentioned it, I've seen a couple of people talking about it. From what I can see is that when he was supposed to be quarantining, he was playing hockey in Charlestown, which is baffling to me. And was exposed.
He's going for the kitchen cup. That's all. Or what is it called?
It's the kitchen cup, but he was not at the. He's not where they played the kitchen cup. I just think that was baffling because so apparently he was exposed to someone with the virus or something, and so what I'm picturing in my head is he showed up to play hockey and there were already a bunch of kids because it's Charlestown and there's almost always someone playing hockey at any of the rinks in town. And he just decided to play with a bunch of kids that he doesn't know what they've been exposed to and what have you in a pandemic, and that is not a good idea. It seems like none of the other players that have been in the that didn't have to worry about coming back into the country, none of them were doing things like that because obviously only one Bruins player ever tested positive for the coronavirus, and it was long enough ago that whoever it was is now practicing with the team. So I think it just comes down to Pasternak's lack of maturity, which is obviously a worrying thing.
So just to kind of add on to the story about David Pastrnak being potentially in contact with someone that tested positive for COVID, there was real concern about a week or two ago because there were 9 Bruins that weren't practicing. And these were very important players. Charlie McAvoy, I think Charlie Coyle was in there. I know Tuukka Rask was in there. That might have been for his fingers, but still, there was a little bit of time there where the Boston Bruins had no idea who the hell was going up north with them to Toronto, to the hub city. And that's a real danger here. And this goes across all sports, this whole quarantine situation. And, I mean, we've been in quarantine really since, the middle of March. And, there's been times where we slip up. Maybe we go outside or we're in a situation where we need a mask. We don't have a mask on. There's quarantine fatigue, and I understand that. But when you're talking about a professional athlete like a David Pastrnak and Eduardo Rodriguez, more likely than not, they have ways or amenities to try and get them whatever they need.
Yeah.
Realistically, David Pastrnak shouldn't have to leave his house except for hockey practices, hockey games, or to go
Right.
to Logan Airport. Same thing with Eduardo Rodriguez and Fenway Park for his case.
Yeah.
The fact that David Pastrnak is out there and potentially in the North End, I think I saw pictures of him
Yeah.
in the North End. That's kind of troubling to me. And I mean, I keep bringing up the history of the Bruins, but don't forget last year at a sponsor function, Pastrnak fell on his hand, and I think he broke his thumb or he
He did.
seriously hurt his thumb.
Yeah.
So he lacked maturity, and I
Yeah.
understand that he's still in his young or mid 20s, but still, players like Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, Tuukka Rask, David Krejci, Brad Marchand even, they
Hmm.
need to get on Pastrnak.
Yeah. Yeah.
This playoff chase is only going to be, what, 2, 3 months probably? That's all you have to do. After that, go out and do whatever you want. I mean, realistically, you shouldn't, but if you want to go out to the North End, fine. But right now, time is money, and the Bruins' window for chasing this championship is quickly closing. You
Yeah.
don't want your 25 or 24-year-old center or wing, whatever, to be the root of the problem when you talk about why this Bruins team choked in the playoffs.
Right. It really surprises me that Bergeron and Chara haven't gotten on his case about this kind of stuff yet. Or maybe he's just not listening, and that worries me too, because from what you hear from almost every young player in the Bruins locker room is that they look to Chara and Bergeron for everything. And they should, because they've been on the team for over a decade now. They've both won and lost in the Stanley Cup at this point. They have basically every experience a professional hockey player can have at this point. So they should be being looked up to. And of course, there have been younger players that have come out and been like, I just follow their lead. I just follow their lead. But it seems like Pastrnak isn't doing that. And it might just be the fact that he's had such a good season that it's kind of gone to his head a little bit. And that worries me as well.
Okay, here's the thing. If you're far, far away like David Pastrnak was during this lockdown, maybe leave a couple weeks early. Give yourself some extra time. Come to Boston. It's a nice place to walk around socially distant with masks on. Okay, so got that out of my system. Let's talk about the round robin situation for the Boston Bruins. As we talked about in the past, teams 5 through 12 will be playing a play-in tournament essentially, and the top 4 teams in each conference will be playing a one-game round robin. So the Boston Bruins are going to be playing Philadelphia, Washington, and Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at how the Bruins have done this season against those 3 teams. Philadelphia, the Bruins were 1-0-2. Against the Capitals, they were 1-1-1, and against the Tampa Bay Lightning, who many are thinking will face the Bruins in the conference final, the Bruins were 1-2-1.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of talk ever since really the start of the calendar year that the Boston Bruins were locks to be Stanley Cup champions, or at the very least being in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
Are Bruins fans as a whole maybe looking past this round robin format?
I think some might be. Well, I'm not yet because, like you said, Tampa Bay scares me, especially after them failing so miserably last year. If I'm Tampa Bay, I have everything in the world to prove. So that's the team that if anyone's going to take down the Bruins, I think they're the most likely to do it. Now, that's not to say that Washington and Philadelphia also don't have a good chance to, because they do, because they're obviously very good teams. And like you said, I think the Bruins have only won one game against each of those from the numbers you just read. So the round robin tournament, it's going to be insane. And it's probably going to be way more entertaining, I think, than some of the early rounds of the playoffs, because these are 4 phenomenal teams that are going to desperately try to beat each other. So I'm not comfortable as a Bruins fan going into the round robin, because I feel like there's definitely, especially with if Pasternak's not ready to play or not, or his game is off, I'm worried about the Bruins in the round robin for sure.
I'm concerned about the Bruins. When they face Philadelphia, I'm not really concerned about that because those two losses were overtime situations. But against Tampa Bay, they're facing a player like Nikita Kucherov, who before this long break scored a point in 23 of his last 24 games. Now, ironically enough, the one game he didn't score a point in was against the Bruins. But
Yeah.
still, you have other key players like Steven Stamkos, who knows how he's going to come back after that injury before the break.
Right.
Also, Victor Hedman. And when you face the Washington Capitals, you're facing a goalie that has had your number really
Yeah.
the past decade. Braden Holtby against the Bruins. Listen to this: 1.82 goals against average, 4 shutouts, a 944 save percentage, and an 18-3 record.
That's crazy.
So we talked about the importance of having Tuukka Rask in net. And I think games against the Capitals and against the Lightning are going to be crucial games to have Tuukka Rask in net. Against Philadelphia, that's when he put Jaro Halak in there. Against the Blue Jackets on July 30th, that's when he put Jaro Halak in there probably for 2 periods. So the game against the Capitals, the game against the Lightning, those are the games you need to have everybody in there. You need to have to make sure that David Pastrnak has like security around his hotel room door to make sure he doesn't go frolicking all around Toronto.
Yeah, they got to room him with Bergeron because I think that's the only person that is going to have any luck actually keeping him like from doing stupid stuff.
All right, very quickly here, Matt Grzelcyk said that he is prepared to be pretty isolated in the hub cities. Are other Bruins and other players ready to be inside of a hub city? The NBA has been inside their campus or bubble for about a month now as of this taping. So is there any concern about players maybe trying to escape out of their hub?
I think there's always going to be a concern with that. Like we said with Pastrnak, it's always young guys with a lot of money and not enough to do is a dangerous combination. But it's funny because when you said this was a quote from Matt Grzelcyk, and from what I understand, him and a lot of the younger Bruins they don't all live together, but they all live like in separate apartments together. So what I'm going to assume is they were all quarantining together to begin with. So for them, it's probably going to be like nothing different than living in Boston right now. And there's so much stuff you can do to entertain yourself. Like I know a lot of the NBA players are doing video games and stuff like that. I'm sure the NHL players will do the same. And Brad Marchand mentioned something about taking his guitar, and Tuukka will probably have his drums. So they'll probably have jam sessions. Like I'm sure that they'll keep themselves entertained. Don't worry about it.
I fear for the poor hotel staff having to listen to Tuukka and Brad Marchand. Okay, well, we go from that glorious image to the Boston Celtics now transitioning to basketball. As of this taping right now, we're just basically hours away from the Boston Celtics' first scrimmage against the Oklahoma City Thunder. They get set to restart their season on July 31st. And really, ever since the team got to Orlando, the big question has been about Kemba Walker and his ailing knee. Concern about the knee of Kemba Walker here after a 4+ month layoff?
Yes, because if it's still bothering him, we're inching closer and closer into he needs surgery territory, and that's kind of a scary thought. I hate to make the comparison because I know it's probably going to annoy you, but we saw the knee problems with Kyrie Irving, with him getting screws in them and to getting the screws taken out of them, and I can't play for the playoffs, and I always think back to the first playoffs that Kyrie Irving was in Boston, and they got to the Eastern Conference Finals without him, and imagine what it could have been with him on the court. So it really concerns me. And now I don't necessarily maybe put as much stock into Kemba as I would have that situation with Kyrie, only because since that playoffs and kind of because of that playoffs, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are your leaders in the team, and they're the most talented players on the team. So I think that they're going to be able to carry a load more than they would have back then because they've matured so much as players since then. So yes, I'm concerned with Kemba's knee and the long-term aspect for it, but I also know that we are not putting all of our hopes in Kemba Walker because there's so many other talented players on the team. So I'm not too concerned about the team. I'm concerned about Kemba, but not as concerned about the team.
So the issue for Kemba Walker here is if he needs surgery, obviously the Celtics would hold off unless it's an ACL, MCL injury. Right. They would hold off until after the season. The problem is the Celtics just had 4 or 5 months off. Yeah. And after this season, they're going to have maybe, 2 or 3 months. So if you have a knee operation, you're talking about Kemba Walker missing part of the 2020-2021 season.
Yeah.
The issue for the Celtics here is really when they started practicing, they were inside of the bubble. They were practicing at the Auerbach Center, but that was just basically a shoot around and
Right.
some light drills. It wasn't really the hard practices that we're hearing about right now.
Yeah.
But for Kemba Walker, like you said, he was in Charlotte before he got to Boston. And with the Hornets, he missed a combination or over the last 4 seasons combined, Kemba Walker has missed 7 games. So
Yeah.
obviously he's missed the most games this season, but he's used to being a leader. He's not used to having that supporting cast. But with a player
Right.
like Tatum and a player like Brown, that can kind of patchwork things, hopefully.
Right.
We're hearing about minutes restrictions. I don't think you're going to have a minutes restriction against Milwaukee,
No.
against Toronto, but there are opportunities there to sit number 8.
Right. And
Uh,
I think that was kind of half the appeal of Kemba coming here in the first place, was the fact that he'd have support. Because for all we know, these knee issues have been plaguing him for quite some time. But because he was the guy and the only guy in Charlotte, he was probably playing through that. You know what I mean? So it's like he probably feels more comfortable being able to take some time off or doing minutes restrictions now. And I know that the Celtics probably won't have much time off between this season and next season, but if he needs a surgery, they need to let him have the surgery, because I would rather them have this fixed now than get it worse and we lose him for years instead of a couple of months.
all right. So how should the C's approach these seeding games with Kemba Walker? Mentioned they open against Milwaukee. They play against Portland, a back-to-back against Miami and Brooklyn. Then they play the Raptors, followed by the Magic, Grizzlies, and closing things out against the Washington Wizards. So how should the Celtics approach Kemba Walker's time on the floor?
I would let him play normally against Milwaukee, barring any flare-ups during the game. Like if it gets bad during the game, yeah, I would pull him. But for the rest of Toronto is also going to be a tough team to play. But for all those other teams, I don't see the Celtics having much of an issue. Now, I'm not going to say that they're going to go in and win all of those games, but I think that they'll win a vast majority of them, barring, like, if you pull the Bucks and the Raptors out of there. So I would definitely keep him on minutes restrictions for most of those games. Is that way that hopefully by the time the playoffs hit, he'll be in better shape than he is now.
I think realistically, you can sit him for most of these games if you want to, if that knee really flares up.
Yeah.
But you need him for a game against Milwaukee, especially if Eric Bledsoe isn't playing because he's coming to the bubble late due to coronavirus.
Yeah.
So he needs to be in there for that game. He needs to be in for Toronto so that way he can kind of offset what scoring Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam gives you.
Yeah.
But one game that he won't play is either Miami or Brooklyn, because that's a back-to-back. And realistically, players don't play back-to-backs anymore.
Right.
But you take out Milwaukee and Toronto, the combined win-loss record of the Celtics' remaining opponents in these seeding games, 186 and 193.
Right.
They have the, I believe, third or fourth easiest schedule among teams down in the campus. So
yeah,
maybe a positive there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Brad Stevens kind of have Walker in there, play a few blocks of minutes just to see how his knee recovers after sitting down for a few minutes. But that's one thing that people are looking at inside the bubble. Another is some good news about the coronavirus, as they have gone about a week plus now as of this taping with 0 positive COVID tests among players. Has the NBA figured out the best way to complete a season here in the United States?
I think so. I really do. And now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's always going to work. And because like we said with the NHL, there might be some kid that escapes the bubble and screws up. But I think from what the NBA can control, they did a great job. And yeah, Florida is a tough place to be, but they're so isolated in Disney now that it definitely was the best option. I can't think of something else that they could have done, barring somehow also being in Canada, than they did with this. So they definitely did a good job. And the amount of stuff that they have to do down there is awesome. Like they're fishing and golfing and playing volleyball. The best thing was the did you see the video of Ben Simmons after he caught a fish and he tried to throw it back into the ocean and missed the ocean? It hit the deck twice before bouncing into the water.
I didn't see it, but I could see that because
Right.
he's god awful at shooting threes, so he's
He
probably
can't
god
hit a
awful
shot.
at shooting
Yeah.
pitch.
So hopefully that's good news going forward that he still can't. He didn't miraculously get a 3-point shot during this quarantine.
Well, it's 2020. God only knows. He might be lights out when we come back
Who knows?
next week. Quickly here, with 3 exhibition games taking place for the Celtics against the Thunder, the Suns, and the Rockets, what do you want to see from the Boston Celtics in these 3 games that don't count?
I want to see them get back into the rhythm that they had post quarantine. Pre-quarantine. They're definitely one of the most cohesive teams in the NBA, I think, and they have they work very well together. They clearly like each other. I mean, both Jason Tatum and Enes Kanter have been quoted in saying that practicing in the bubble has been some of the funnest basketball practice that they've had in years. So I like seeing that. So what I want to see out of them in these exhibition games is kind of that teamwork mentality. And even if, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are only playing if they're not playing a lot of minutes and we're mostly seeing, we got Taco out there and Carson Edwards and Romeo Langford, that's fine too, because all those guys are great as well. So I would like to see kind of like an even match of everyone kind of having similar minutes and just seeing that rotation and making sure they all can play cohesively still.
I think it's very important to see how Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum come back, because realistically, they're going to be your number 2 and number 3 scorers on the starting 5. And can Jason Tatum continue the hot stretch he was on before the season ended? He was averaging close to 30 points a game.
Right.
Now, it's not to think that he's going to replicate that in the first 3 games back, but I want to see if he tries to force himself to shoot his way back into being a 30-plus point a game scorer. And also, can Jaylen Brown continue to force his way inside the paint, be that brute force that he was against the LA Lakers and LeBron? And also, how is Gordon Hayward going to come back as well? Because he had some moments during the first part of the season where he was averaging 20 points a game.
Right.
He could potentially really be an X factor for the Boston Celtics when they get back on the floor again. That is coming up on July 31st against Milwaukee, a 6:30 tip. So very quickly here, since we have about 2 minutes left, we put a poll out on Twitter, and I mean, this might have been a mistake here. Which team do you have confidence in going further in their respective playoffs, the Celtics or the Bruins? I tried to put a plea in there for Celtics fans to try and help me out, but alas, it's the Boston Bruins, the Puckheads, winning out in the survey.
Yeah, I don't think like I said this a bunch of times before. I think the Celtics are a very good team. I can't see them getting past Giannis. I really can't see that in a best of 7. I think that the Bucks win every time, and it kind of sucks. Obviously, I want to see the Celtics win, but I think it would be Boston's 2020 luck that the Bruins and the Celtics both win, and we can't have parades for either one of them. That's definitely I would not. I could see that happening easily.
I could see during the nighttime after those games, I could see some special parades happening. But
oh God, it'll be a nightmare.
For me, surprisingly, I think the Bruins actually do have a more legitimate shot, because if you think about the Celtics road right now, they're going to be playing a team. There we go, in Philadelphia that they've had a hard time against. Joel Embiid's going to be healthy when they get back. Ben Simmons is going to be healthy when they get back. How's Tobias Harris going to come out? So that would be their first round matchup. Potentially, if they get past them, your second round matchup would be the Toronto Raptors.
Right.
And home court or not, you still have to play a Serge Ibaka, Pau Gasol, Marcus Gasol lineup that they're healthy. Kyle Lowry's going to be healthy. And then also get through the Bucks. And then if you somehow get through them, you go ahead and you face probably either the Lakers, Clippers, or Rockets. So
and those are, I mean, you have 3 of the biggest stars in the league headlining each of those teams. So it's going to be, the road to victory for the Bruins is a lot less, for the Celtics is a lot less clear than the Bruins, but that could happen. We'll see.
All right. Well, we said back in March that we can't wait for sports to come back. Sports are back. Here we go, getting set for the Celtics, Bruins, and the Red Sox. They open up as well, and we'll be here to talk about them, complain about them, criticize them, and all of that fun stuff.
Lots of complaining, probably.
Here on Out of Balance. For Mary Evers, I'm John Luck. Thanks for watching.